All right, today we're going to be digging into a Yamaha Grizzly 125 carburetor. We're going to be doing a complete rebuild, clean, and then going back together. Obviously, we've got the carburetor off at this time. We've got the choke cable here. I've shot videos of removing the carburetor as well as going to have one on the installation. We've got servicing the Grizzly 125 as well as a couple other maintenance videos on this machine. So make sure you check those out on our channel. If you guys got questions or comments, make sure and leave those below in the comment section. Feedback from you guys is how we know which direction to take for our next videos. So make sure and leave some of those comments down below if you will. First things first, obviously, like I said, got the carburetor off, and I wanted to show you what it looked like to remove your choke cable. A small choke cable here, it's just a pull choke, and so this is the spring-loaded mechanism on the bottom here. So you pull it, so you're engaging the choke, and then it should just drop back down, but may not just because it's not lined up properly. But to remove it, it's going to be stuck in the top here by your cap, and this is going to be your throttle cable cap. And this is going to be in your choke portion of your carburetor. So 14 millimeter wrench, go ahead and remove that cap and then pull it up. Now, if you're going to want to replace this plunger, then what you do is you actually take this spring. I like to pull it back just a touch, and then you can slide your plunger off of there. Then you can just let your spring go carefully out. Now this cap will actually pop up too if you want to replace that. Obviously, then you can replace your cable. So all those components there. Going back together, you've got your cap. We're going to slide your spring on. And then we're going to take and pull your spring down. And then slide your plunger on there. So that is reassembling your choke plunger. All right, setting the choke assembly aside here, we're going to take and where your throttle cable went down to, this is your throttle cable cap here. You can take this off. Now, obviously, if this was on the four-wheeler, the throttle cable would run through this cap. It would run through this spring. This O-ring sits up here, and then your slide would come out with it. So your slide is here. Now, you'd have a cable that actually ran down to the center here, ran into that outlet there. So if that was a throttle cable, what I would do is actually take and push down, grab that, it'd be kind of a tab that's on the bottom here, pull it outside of this slide area, and then raise it up. Everything's just going to come off all together, including your cap and your spring. So it's going to come off just like that. Then we have your needle and your slide here detached. We can set that aside, and then we can get into our carburetor. So this is going to be the engine side here. This is your intake. So you've got an intake boot, you've got your air filter, your air box here, and then air is going to flow in through this way. When you push your thumb throttle, it's actually going to take and lift up your slide, and that's going to lift up your needle. So that's going to be allowing more air to flow through this venturi here. And then when you lift this needle up, or when this needle goes up, it's going to allow more fuel up your main jet. And I'll show you that when we get into your bottom end of your carburetor here. I'm going to set our slide and our spring aside as we flip this carburetor up. I'm going to show you a couple things here. We got your fuel coming in here, this inlet. So carburetor sitting this way. That fuel is going to run in this way. It's going to run into your bottom bowl area. Right here is your drain nipple here, and this is where basically if we've got too much fuel inside your bottom bowl, then that fuel is going to come and run out this bottom tab. So if your four-wheeler is bouncing around and it's not burning all the fuel that's down inside of your bowl area, it's going to come out your overflow here. If you've got a needle that's stuck open, or a needle that's just broken, then your bowl is going to load up with fuel. That excess is going to flow out the bottom. You always want to make sure that you've got a drain hose on the bottom there. Otherwise, you're draining the fuel that's coming out this bottom nipple here directly onto your engine. And it's a potential fire hazard, but it also will discolor and just make your engine pretty nasty looking. So pull your bottom four Phillips screws off of your bottom bowl here, and then you can just wiggle that back and forth. That'll allow you to pull and dump your screws out. We've got your bottom bowl here. This is your gasket. It's important that you replace this when you're going back together. or at least make sure that it's in good condition. You don't want any dirt and debris sitting in this bottom end here. So anything that's down here is potentially, when you give it gas, it's going to suck up whatever kind of elements are in the bottom of your bowl here up into your jets, and that's when your four-wheeler starts running poorly and or won't start. So real small orifices on these jets here. We've got this plastic piece. I do believe this is just to keep fuel from sloshing around, keep it kind of directed up into this main jet area. Your pilot jet's going to be down here. I'm going to grab a little flat screwdriver and pull that pilot jet out, show you that. But what I did want to show you quick before I did that was, if you've got your throttle cable on here and your slide down in your bottom, or the slide down in this outlet here, if you're giving it gas, okay, so your slide's going up, you can maybe see that there. Hopefully, slide's going up. That's going to allow more fuel to flow through your main jet. If you've got performance parts on your four-wheeler or just an intake system or anything at all, you're going to want to change out this main jet, because what's happening is you're needing more fuel down into your engine, and this main jet here is restricting that. If you're changing altitude, your riding altitude, also something you want to change would be your main jet. Your pilot jet, which they say is from about 0 throttle to quarter throttle, this is your pilot jet here. It's a real small jet, and this is what's going to help your four-wheeler start. It's also going to help it sit there and idle. So if your motorcycle or your four-wheeler isn't idling correctly, first place I would look is this pilot jet. 9 times out of 10, that's where your issues are going to be. It's such a small orifice that any amount of dirt and sand, or even your carburetor sitting there with fuel in it over the winter, can gum that jet up there and then cause your four-wheeler not to start. So as soon as you start giving it gas, then that's when your main jet comes into play, because this slide and needle is going to go up, and it's going to suck. You're going to start sucking fuel out of your bottom bowl area here up through your main jet. So also important to keep this clean. Make sure it's in good condition. Make sure it's the right size, and I'll give you the size of that when I get that pulled out. Remove your main jet, and that's just going to take a larger flat screwdriver here. Now it looks like the main jet holder is going to come out with it, which is not uncommon. I do like to separate them, make sure they're both cleaned out really well. But if you are able to see through your main jet as well as your main jet holder, then it's probably cleaned out enough. But I do like to take carbon choke cleaner, spray through it, and make sure that area is super cleaned out. Take compressed air, blow through it, obviously hold it up to light, make sure you can see through it without any obstructions there. So that's your main jet. Then we've got your pilot jet, which is down in this port here. And you want to make sure you use a smaller screwdriver like this. You want to make sure you're on it good and tight before you start screwing, because they're a brass jet, and if you turn your screwdriver on that brass jet without it actually being secure, then you're going to round that jet off there. Then it's a huge pain to get cleaned out and get back in. So same thing, make sure you can see through your pilot jet, make sure you can blow through it, spray carbon choke cleaner and compressed air through it, and make sure that you've got the right size in there. So this is your pilot jet here. So next thing I like to do is setting those aside after they're all clean. We'll make sure we clean them out really good before going back together. Is take and actually push this pin out here. That's going to allow you to take your float off. That's going to allow you to take your needle and seat off here. So take your screwdriver, push on that little pin that runs through these 2 aluminum posts, and you want to be really careful if you're using anything but your fingers that you're not going to break off these posts here, because that is an unreplaceable item, meaning you have to buy a new carburetor. So take and pull it out, and you can pull it out all the way. I like to, just because then you're not, if you go ahead and accidentally drop your carburetor down like this, it's probably going to break that post off. So those posts are super fragile. I'd say that's the biggest thing you need to be concerned about when you're pulling that bottom bowl off. So there is, oops, I just dropped it down there. There is your needle, which is here, and your seat that is here. Now to put this needle and the seat should seal it up to where you don't have any fluid flowing through there. If you do, then you're gonna end up having too much fuel down in this bottom bowl area here, and that fuel is gonna hit that overflow tube. It's gonna drain out that overflow tube. You don't want to just stick something in that tube just because your carburetor is going to continue to drip fuel, because what that's doing is blocking off this, this outlet here. Once we've got our jets completely cleaned out, make sure that all your orifices, all your tunnels are all cleaned out. Spray carbon choke cleaner through all those ports there. Make sure that there is no debris in your carburetor here. Then we can start going back together. Before we start completely going back together, what I like to do is show you this air fuel screw, which is this screw right on the engine side of your carburetor. Now this is tuned by the number of turns out. So we're in this position. First, because we haven't touched it yet, we're going to count how many turns in it is. Got half, that's 1, that's 1.5, that's 2. And that's all the way in. Now, if we were going to go and make an adjustment, typically your adjustment is going to be between 2 and 2.5 turns out. So we're going to start counting half, 1, 1.5, 2, and 2.25. That's what it should be from the factory. So that's how you adjust your air fuel screw, and it's right there on top. Typically, you're only messing with that if you're changing something on your four-wheeler or changing your riding condition or your altitude. To remove your seat, you've got a small Phillips screw. We're going to go ahead and remove that, and that's just a holder. And then that holder is going to come with it. Now we're going to take and remove our seat, and you could actually take and use pliers or something as long as you've got a new one. So the main thing is that you've got a replacement, because you don't want to just take pliers and start bending this up. So we've got our here. Going back together then, make sure you place that O-ring, slide that seat back into place. And sometimes you don't actually have to replace this needle and seat. It would only be if your carburetor is leaking fuel. The other reason, if you bought a carb kit and it included this needle and seat, I would just replace it because it is something that with that O-ring in there, it could and will potentially wear out. So going back together then, put that holder in place, make sure your Phillips is snug there. Obviously don't go Hulk mode on that. That's not a very big part. Take your needle there and hook it on your float. Then we're going to take and drop that down into place. And then we're going to take our pin. And before I do that, it doesn't matter which direction this goes on there. So some people get caught up on which direction this needle goes. It's hung square in the middle there, so it doesn't really matter which side you go on. Now, that being said, this is an adjustable float. I've done a separate video on how to adjust the float on a four-wheeler, so make sure you check that video out. But you do want to make sure that pin there, this metal clip, is adjusted properly. So slide that pin through. Slide it through. Okay, now what I like to do, just as kind of a little test, you can actually take what I said earlier with carbon choke cleaner. You can take and do the same thing by just blowing through it with your mouth. So you can take and I'm going to put it this direction here so you can see a little bit better, but I'm going to blow in that port there. That air is going to come out of our needle and seat area here. When I shut it or when it closes completely, I shouldn't be able to blow through there at all. I don't know if you're able to see that there, but when I lifted up on that, allowed air through there. When I closed it, it didn't allow any air in at all. So that means that's sealing up properly. You can do the same thing with fuel. If you take and set a auxiliary tank on here, let that fuel run down, you can shut it on and off like that. Same thing with carbon choke cleaner. I would say that if you take carbon choke cleaner and blow through there, the amount of pressure you won't have on your actual four-wheeler itself, so you might get a little bit of fluid through there. So a little more challenging when you use carbon choke cleaner or even compressed air. It's hard to control that amount. But I will say if you blow through there with air and it shuts off completely, then you're good to go. So that's all that needs done there. We've got your main jet holder. We're going to drop that into place, and you can actually take and tighten that up right now with an 8mm wrench. Obviously there's that O-ring on there. Inspect that, replace that if needed. But rather than tighten it up, I like to take and actually put our main jet into place. Screw that in. And then you can take, and you want a large enough screwdriver to where you're not going to take and round off this jet. Same thing with the pilot jet. So if I were to take a small screwdriver like this and start twisting on this, you're going to get in, you're going to damage this main jet area. We've got our pilot jet. We're going to drop that down into place. All of these jets and ports, again, we blow them through with compressed air. We blow them through with carbon choke cleaner. All of them are free and clear. So going to run that pilot jet down. Same thing. Make sure you've got a good hold on it and then tighten it down. Again, these are brass jets. It doesn't take a ton and they're rounded off. Then you've got issues. So we've got our plastic, I don't even know what to call this thing here. Adapter, plate, holder, thinger. We're going to set that into place. Cup side up, so if your carburetor's sitting here, it's going to be like a bowl. Set that into place. Obviously, if the gasket needs replaced, replace that. If you've ordered a jet kit from us or somebody else, 9 times out of 10, they're going to come with a gasket. If you order it off of some random knockoff parts place, may not be the right gasket, but you want to make sure you get a good gasket in there. You're going to set that bowl back down. Take your 4 screws, put them into place here, and snug these up. Now, please do not go Hulk mode on these either, because they're very small screws going into an aluminum carburetor, and it's very easy to either round off the screws or rip the threads out of the carburetor or damage any of these components. So you don't have to go Hulk mode. That gasket's going to do its job. Just snug them up. You want to make sure they don't work themselves out, but you also don't have to just go total nuts on them either. So many times I've seen it where these are completely rounded off and then it turns into a complete bear rebuilding that carburetor. So here is your idle adjust. This is going to be a thumb screw here or a Phillips screw. So if you need to turn your idle up, then you're going to turn it clockwise, turn it down, turn it counterclockwise. So that direction there. What this is doing is actually taking your slide and raising it up. So you can see that, that beveled portion of your slide. When you screw this in, it's actually taking and lifting this slide up. So that's how that works. That's going to allow more air, which in turn is going to suck more fuel up through your through your carburetor. So if you need to replace your needle on this model, you can take and actually just push up. And you don't want to go too crazy with it because you've got a spring-loaded keeper here, and you don't want that to go flying somewhere. But you've got your needle here, and you've got, it looks like, several adjustments. Sometimes you have several adjustments. This is just a one size needle here. So make sure that clip's in place. You're going to drop that needle down. Then you're going to take your clip and drop it down, and then you're going to take a screwdriver and work that into place. This clip here is actually what's going to hold your needle in. So just keep that in mind. You need that to be in the right place. Now, if you haven't put your throttle cable on yet, which we haven't, you're going to want to line this up so that it allows you to get your throttle cable down this slide here and then hook it right underneath of your slide. So again, drop that down into place. This will actually only go down completely one direction. It'll let you start this way, but it won't let you go very far. So you might have to do a 180, slide that slide and needle down. You want to make sure that your needle goes all the way down rather than taking, sometimes if that needle isn't lined up, what it'll do is actually take and slide your needle back up and out. So make sure it slides, drop down into that main jet holder. We're going to take our cable, our O-ring there, or our gasket. We're going to drop that into place. And now, temporarily, until we go back on the four-wheeler, I'm just going to take, and just to keep all these components together, I'm just going to put this cap on here for now. Now, again, I'll shoot a video when we reinstall this carburetor on the four-wheeler. That way you know exactly how to get it done and reassemble it back onto the four-wheeler. Again, putting this choke back on there, slide that plunger down into place along with that spring. Make sure you've got a good O-ring on your cap, and then you can just take and turn this into place. These brass caps or these aluminum caps are a way better option than sometimes you see a plastic cap on there. If you order something from China, more than likely it's probably going to have a plastic cap. What happens so many times is those get completely rounded off, and the only way to remove it is with pliers. The only way to fix that is to replace it once you've completely rounded off and destroyed that plastic nut. So that being said, make sure you're buying quality parts when you go and replace some of these parts on your carburetor, because you want to know that you're not going to have an issue in another 2 weeks. So that is the carb clean on a Yamaha Grizzly 125. If you guys got questions or comments, make sure and leave those in the comment section below. I do appreciate you guys watching. I do appreciate any feedback I can get from you guys. Helps us make videos in the future. Thanks for watching.